Okay, Paul, unmute and go.
Well, I think you may still be muted.
All right, do we have Bill Sheperd in front of you?
Yes, you do.
We do, yes.
And still?
Now we have a picture of a
No.
lighthouse with your poem or your prayer. Now it's Bill.
Okay, well, we get that out of the way. All right, I want to have the slideshow on, which should give us both sides. And that hopefully gets him in front of you. Good evening,
Yes.
ladies and gentlemen, friends and extended family. I appreciate that all of you have joined us this evening. And there are some new people, I think, joining us, and that's certainly welcome as well. Because we've had some previous bombing, then we're being a little more careful about letting people in. And so we certainly hope not to offend, but we do want you to recognize that we do have that history we're having to deal with. It is my pleasure this evening to welcome you as participants, but more especially to welcome Bill Sheperd as our presenter. He is the author of many of the restoration history articles that we have had, of which we've had some presentations in the past. And tonight he'll be addressing the topic of Was the Gospel Restored Through Joseph Smith Rejected? And he is a leader of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Strangite, in Wisconsin. And as a teacher for the developmentally disabled, his insight into the William Hodges case is, in my view, one of the more instructive psychological examinations that we've had in our restoration history. He regularly participates in the forum, and we welcome his presentation, for he embodies the passion of the restored gospel, calling us to speak truth to power. And so I welcome Bill back tonight, and on this day of eclipses, we'll have eclipses as we pray together. Lord, whose love eclipses all the obstructions, the black holes, and the negative feelings of our lives. We gather on this day in which we see the sun eclipsed, yet the moon, the earth, the universe, and your plan survives. And we gather to consider your plan, its implementation, its relationship to the restoration movements, its relationship to our lives, encapsulating a bit of your son's story. And we see it eclipsed. The Prince of Peace, represented by 2 millennia of wars among Christians who should have been peacefully adding to your glory. We see our world at an impasse. Failure to communicate having created chasms we use to justify marginalization and war. We see our heritage and traditions that communicate continuation of the same. Failure to recognize your love, your plan, the eternal prospects at our core. And we wonder how much patience you can have with us. How long will you suffer? And at what point will our feeble efforts be rejected? And we see our Earth Mother groaning, exploited, polluted, yet graciously caring for us, feeding us, nurturing us much as expected. And we gather here on Zoom tonight to hear Brother Sheperd, our presenter, a man of history, addressing a key issue by which our understanding can be affected. A question of the circumstances under which we do what we do strays so far from your intent in us that our efforts, and even possibly we, are rejected. At the same time, we represent a cross-section of the restoration movement, an effort to reclaim your message, to see that your story survives. Divided, yet come together in an effort to work from our commonalities, to claim our stewardship in eternal lives. So we ask that you bless us your eternal Son, never to be eclipsed. Amen. Brother Sheperd, it is so good to have you back. I am so pleased to be able to count you as part of the family and friends that's consistently here. And I think you probably have the PowerPoint ready, so let's proceed. Don't hear you yet, Bill. Somehow we've got to get muted, the mute taken care of. The sign indicates you're still muted, Bill.
I'm
There you go.
fine now.
I apologize. I was thinking that we'll get on. Robert, will we be able to show those slides?
Yes, let me go ahead.
Good. I'm going to talk to my heart. What I in the 2008 Journal of Mormon History and have presented it in Utah and so forth. We're looking at, can you go up and we'll see the year on this? Oh, well, let's go to 3rd Nephi. We'll look at that. And go over, we can look at the footnote. Okay, let's go back to 10, please. This is the most important single reference about what I call the rejected gospel. And it comes, of course, from 3rd Nephi. And have a volunteer to read that 10, please.
Starting at 10.
Yes.
And thus commandeth the Father that I should say unto you, at that day when the Gentiles shall sin against my gospel, and shall be lifted up in all the pride of their hearts above all nations and above all the people and people of the whole earth, shall be filled with all manner of lyings and of deceits and of mischiefs and all manner of hypocrisy and murder and priestcrafts and whoredoms and of secret abominations. And if they shall do all those things and shall reject the fullness of my gospel, behold, saith the Father, I will bring the fullness of my gospel from among them. Continue.
And thank you. And if, of course, remember my which I have made unto my people, O house of Israel, my gospel. And I will show unto thee, O house of Israel, shall not have, but I covenant to the house of Israel, and you of the full fall. That really the main thing is we're talking giving to the
Bob, I think we can intrude here, try to fix the audio. Bill, we have a problem. We're missing a percentage of your words. And for some reason, I don't know why we're missing that, but we need to try to correct it if we can, both for you and for the record. So after,
I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure it's Bill's internet connection that's causing it. So
we may not
I
have a
think
choice.
we need let's let him continue and see if it works its way out. Go ahead, Bill.
Apologize. Control. Great to in the latter days. And it's really saying gospel. Then I'm going to take it from you. Now, what is important here is a footnote.
Bill, I've got a suggestion. Why don't you, can you hear me okay, Bill? Bill, Bill, if you can hear me, go down into the lower left of your screen and turn off the video.
Video.
That might help. We won't see you. Okay, that's good. Now continue again. Let's see if we get better audio.
Okay, it is saying it's unstable, which is pretty obvious. But this section of 3rd Nephi is very have to else, and this is Orson Pratt. Orson, original in use, and he is very learned. And Brigham Young uses him a lot, slating things to like him. Orson Pratt is known as the professor. He footnotes the Book of Mormon. I don't know if you're hearing me, but he is the footnote, the Book of Mormon. He's going to divide it into verses. When he comes to footnote T, if you decision that's going to influence yes, and of course we all do, that the gospel was not universally accepted, that there are many problems and trials from the very first. The first was when they were baptisms, and somebody went out and they made a dam, drained the dam. That is very minor, of course, but it's not the question of the dependent Zion 3 with the several was not minor. The driving from Kirtland was not minor. The expulsion of Nauvoo, of course, is not minor. And the capstone of evilness I look at was the murder of Hiram's. So my point is that, and what I for this restored through the prophet Joseph Smith, reject this, and that the main emphasis of this program is your discussion, because it to see who think with events from the 1800s or 1830, 40, 50. This happened. Has the gospel been rejected? And if the gospel has been, say to you as a string item that the Stringites, after the death of Joseph Smith, fat and happy, and the Brighamites would have us about being a prophet, and of course the Stringites would say, "Oh, we," and the Stringites would beat them by saying the Brighamites. And it's so interesting that if you go to today's period, it's saying the gospel is bursting forth. Are saying, but we're rejecting this idea of happens fairly repeatedly in the gospel. Read this, particularly if you can, but look T, and footnote T is talking about that when the Gentiles of these, it will be affected. And from the early edition, I believe 1816 through 2000, the Brighamites, this belief, this T, fulfilled when the saints left us.
Bill, would you like me to read T? We didn't hear it either time you said it.
I'm sorry.
Would you like me to read T? We didn't hear it either time that you read it.
Please go ahead.
Go ahead, Wednesday. Yeah.
T, fulfilled when the saints left the states and came to Utah, unto the Lamanites or Indians.
Go ahead, Bill.
So again, the Gentiles rejected, and at this time say that the seed are rejected.
Robert, we've had it suggested that perhaps Bill log out and try to log back in and see if that would be better.
We can certainly try that. The best solution would be for him to come in by phone, but that would take some time to get him to do that. That is, I should really work with him outside of this to see if he can call in on his telephone.
I'm sorry, my phone is down right now.
Mm.
Oh, so that wouldn't help either.
Would it be?
So the suggestion is if you would like to log out and then check back in again, it might perhaps be a little better. Would you like to try that?
I'm going to shut down.
Yes.
or
shut
close
down,
any other
and then
programs.
Thank you for your patience, everybody. We'll see if we can't get him back in and have a better connection. Appreciate your patience.
Another possible help, Robert, would be for all of the rest of us to turn off the video so that his machine doesn't have to process all of our video pictures coming to him.
Oh, you mean like stop our videos?
Well, I'm not sure how we would do that, and what comes into him is on a download link, and what we're fussing with is the upload link of his audio. So don't know.
Well, all we have to do is everybody go down and click on your camera, and your image goes away.
When we started, it builds things, said it had low bandwidth, and I wonder if restarting it will help that. I don't know, but sometimes restarting helps my
I
computer.
have let him back in, so
Maybe if he restarted the router, but that's not what we're doing when we restart the computer, or like disconnect from the Wi-Fi and then maybe try to reconnect if there's sometimes there's two different versions of it, but I don't know what setup he has.
He has over time had a problem with his internet and apparently also his telephone.
Okay,
So,
so Bill is back with us. Go ahead and talk, Bill.
I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Can you hear us?
I can hear you. It seems
Okay.
normal now.
That's much better.
That's what. Yeah.
So go ahead,
Well,
Bill.
Well, I do apologize. I don't know what's going on. But again, this third Nephi is so very important because of this footnote T. And if you look down at the bottom of the page, fulfills when the saints left the states and went to Utah. So this idea that the Gentiles had rejected as faith for many, but is finally Orson Pratt, the author of this, once he dies, it is removed in 1920. But this is an important part of our history, if you will, about the rejected gospel. And again, the Strangites accused the Brighamites of being rejected, and then it turns around that the Strangites at this point in time. So the idea of rejection is important. So maybe the end game I wanted to get to is for us, for you, to state your belief, if you would want to, is today with you individually, is the gospel alive and well? And there's one other scripture that's important, and that is from the Doctrine and Covenants, section 45. It's both the Community of Christ and the LDS 45. And I'm going to read 3 verses. And that obviously go this. And in the LDS, it's verses 28, 29, and 30. And when the times of the Gentiles is a light shall forth among them as full of my gospel. They receive receive not the light, and they turn their heart because of men. And in that generation of the Gentiles be fulfilled.
Bill, would you like me to reread that? We missed a few words along the way. Let me read it, okay? And when the times of the Gentiles is come in, a light shall break forth among them that sit in darkness, and it shall be the fullness of my gospel. But they receive it not, for they perceive not the light, and they turn their hearts from me because of the precepts of men. And in that generation shall the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled.
If you would, that I sent. Do you have it?
Are you asking about page 136?
You would read apostasy of the Gentiles. This is representative of what the Mormons are just prior to Joseph Smith's death. So if you'll read that, the apostasy of the Gentiles.
I'm not sure where the apostasy of the Gentiles is a subject that I believe is, no, is that what you're asking, Bill?
Yes, that quote.
Okay, the apostasy of the Gentiles is a subject that I believe is nowhere disputed in all the professing world. It is acknowledged by all that the present generation of religious Gentiles is in a state of confusion and distraction, and that when the time came, I mean the time to put the cutting off of the Gentiles. Hang on. That the Lord would set his hand again to recover his people. The Gentiles have ceased to bring forth the fruit which they brought forth when the kingdom of heaven was first given unto them, and that the gospel which the apostles preached is considered heresy among them. The apostasy of the Gentiles is so great that they know not the doctrine of Christ when they hear it.
Okay, and then if you'll go to 8, Joseph Smith on October 15th.
On October 15, 1843, Joseph Smith prophesied in the name of the Lord God that anguish and wrath and tumulty and tribulation and the withdrawing of the Spirit of God await this generation until they are visited with utter destruction. This generation is as corrupt as the generation of the Jews that crucified Christ. And if he were here today and should preach the same doctrine he did then, they would crucify him.
There are many references time kept the Gentiles for reject. Add those to the persecution on the church, the murders, the driving homes, and driving, if you will, Kirkland, driving people, driving many Gentiles did not accept the and to show some of the persecution and then basically turn it over to and watch at message return Joseph stagnant. I would like out and give your judgments. You think through
So Bill, do you want to open it up for discussion now?
I moderate just I would like to just your personal opinions. What was that day in your mind?
Let me address it. I'm intrigued by this concept, and I didn't hear you make reference to Section 107, which has been removed from the Community of Christ Doctrine and Covenants section on baptism for the dead, which also makes reference to the finishing of the temple in Nauvoo. And if I recall it correctly, it indicates that if the temple is not finished, the church with its dead would be rejected. And so I think, Bill, that confirms or supports the overall premise of what you're talking about. That, however, is a scripture which has been removed from the Community of Christ Doctrine and Covenants because it was never voted upon by the body of the church and approved. And as a matter of fact, I have a resolution that just yesterday was passed by the Midlands Conference to ask for the First Presidency to consider adding some clarification about our understanding of Scripture about why that was removed. But as I go back to whether or not the church is rejected, I find it a fascinating issue, in part because I'm reflecting upon the nature of the stories that we tell. And as I look at this Christmas season and study the story of the Christ, when he came and shared his message, as I see it, it fundamentally was the message of the Prince of Peace and advocacy for peace. And when he died and was resurrected, he left his story in the hands of man. And if you look at what's happened to that story over the last 2,000 years, it would appear to me that he could not be very happy with us. When you consider the quantities of people that have been killed in our religious wars, when we consider the way we have persistently treated the marginalized, I think humankind has not done a very good job of keeping the story of the Christ alive. But I think that's one of the reasons for the restoration. And so the restoration movement has picked up that stewardship. And now then we find ourselves in that stewardship having to raise the same question: to what extent in the restoration are we representing the story of the Christ, and to what extent have we distorted it and marginalized it to the point that it no longer represents what he taught, is teaching, and would have us teach? I'm a little concerned as I look at that I think we've not made a whole lot of progress on peace. We've made an awful lot of progress on war. But in terms of learning to be able to live together in peace and harmony, or as my wife said to us when she came back, tell them, don't forget to love each other. I think that's fundamentally the message of the Christ. And I think that we often, too often, forget to love each other. And so therefore, in a very real sense, the gospel, I think that we've been teaching has been rejected or is being rejected by Christ because it's not the story that he taught. And yet, purposes of God are not to be frustrated. So therefore, I still believe in the rebirth and resurrection and anticipate that we can work together to fulfill the divine purpose.
It has to be rejected.
Can you say that again, Bill?
Do you believe that there is a valid hype on the earth at this time, commensurate with being a prophet?
Well, we believe it in the LDS tradition, certainly. Russell M. Nelson sustained his prophet, seer, and revelator. And the talk he gave yesterday in conference, he affirmed the importance of the restoration of the priesthood and basically that was the keys of salvation in the world today. So certainly that's an LDS belief.
But we have recently had David Fairman and his wife on who have some claim to being prophetic, and they are advocating for the continuation of the message of the Christ in their advocacy.
David, go ahead, please.
I believe that there are many prophets calling us to love one another today. We are not listening to them sometimes very well because there are many prophets calling us to hate each other, or calling to, we don't call those prophets, but I believe that God is inspiring many people to teach us to love. And so I think the prophets are there. They're not often distinguished as prophets anymore.
Bill, are you specifically asking about whether we think special restored priesthood keys are operative in each of the different branches of the restoration? Is that the question?
I'm not sure if he. Bill, did you hear that question to you, Bill Sheperd?
Here his house.
I don't think we understood that, Bill.
Well, if Bill can't answer that question, I'd like to ask it of the different groups. As I said yesterday in conference, President Nelson affirmed the existence of keys, saving keys in the LDS Church. So that's right at the heart of our truth claims in the LDS Church. It's priesthood authority that is held by the president of the church and the quorum of the 12 apostles. So for us, that's fundamental and very much central to our sense of who we are. So I'm wondering about the other branches of the restoration, the various branches that are here. Do you all have any kind of claim to special priesthood authority and power within your denominations?
I would say so. I'm in Community of Christ. I remember having a conversation in a Community of Christ group. We were talking about priesthood and talking about people holding certain keys. And then in our mission initiatives, if I could recall the right one, we have one, oh, it's in All Are Called, the enduring principle. It goes into a bit of like all are called, but here's there's a section on the special part about priesthood. Sorry, typing, trying to find it. Enduring. There we go. And it is the one that is all are called. So God graciously gives people gifts and opportunities to do good and share in God's purposes. Jesus Christ invites people to follow him by becoming disciples who share his life and ministry. Some disciples are called and ordained to particular priesthood responsibilities and ministries for the sake of the community, the congregation, and the world. We respond faithfully and with the help of the Holy Spirit to do our best to be understanding of God's will, which is kind of vague, but it does make a distinction for priesthood. So yeah, and I think the discussion we were having, there's why and how are people called? We talked about maybe sometimes practical, and then sometimes it was just like what traits in this person do, you know, what traits in this person, what gifts of the Holy Spirit in this person can be developed to help them fulfill this role. So in that way, I have heard about it.
So I'm wondering if Bill's point here is from the scriptures that the times of the Gentiles has to be fulfilled before the times of the Lamanites can come in. And so do we believe that the times of the Gentiles as prophesied was fulfilled and ended basically, so that the next part of the gospel, progression could happen? And like, I'm from the LDS tradition as well, but I think that when Brigham Young succeeded to the presidency, he did not claim to be the president or the prophet at first. It took 4 years where just the quorum of the 12 was leading the church. And I think he only kind of came to that idea later. So I wonder if that's where Bill's going with it, that, kind of that was ended, the times of the Gentiles was ended. I don't know.
Okay, thank you, Cheryl. Terry Walker, go ahead, and then Blair.
Just to sort of follow up on what Val said, to me, the biggest difference between LDS and everybody else is our use of temples. The temple in Kirtland was just the beginning, and things that happened in the Nauvoo temple were not things that happened in Nauvoo. Nauvoo was an extension and did much more things. And the LDS have continued that, and it's a huge deal in the church right now. And the temple that the Community of Christ has in Independence does not do the same thing that LDS temples do. That's one difference between the two. So I think, the advent of temples in the LDS tradition is a continuation of what Val said, that it's a matter of authority. And I think that's the biggest difference between LDS and everybody else, basically.
Okay, thank you, Terry. Blair, go ahead, please.
I want to thank then Wednesday for speaking up for the Community of Christ as a new member. I think that all churches have gone somewhat astray. To me, the purposes of the temple should be related to the Kirtland temple functions. And here's where, as just pointed out, we have this difference of opinion, that Terry and me and others. The LDS people seem to go in for the keys, the authority, the claim to have the authority to do things for God. I believe they probably are doing the best they can with the background they've got. Now, I'm not saying that to denigrate it. I'm saying all of the churches are doing the best they can with what they've got. When it was announced that Sister Stacy Cram was going to be our new prophet, I looked at the letter looking for her name. The first I heard about a woman prophet possible, I started thinking about the leaders that we have in the church who are exemplary and who seem to have the prophetic approach, the approach of trying to search out the right thing to do. And I think that I settled on her very rapidly. I eliminated, and I won't count who they were, but I eliminated those that I knew something about, and I said, those are not prophets. But when it came to, and I first was aware of Stacy Cram, I says, that's it. And that's the one that the leaders did choose by the system of discernment in which the whole church was called upon to pray, to act, to try to determine who was called to be the prophet. And although I never had a thing to say about it, I had a sense of vindication of my earlier experiences in considering who the prophet should be. Now, yes, we have a prophet. I have studied the scriptures of prophets from section 162, 163, 164, and 165. I found so many chiasms that those authors never knew that they were using. They're there, and God is speaking through them, is my witness and testimony. Are they perfect? No, they're human. They're all going to make mistakes. Joseph Smith made mistakes. Many, many mistakes. And I can say that from what Wednesday gave us about her talk about Fred M. Smith, I think he was too authoritarian. And that was Wendy's approach. Here is an authoritarian man. But he had a vision of Zion, and he directed the church in directions that the more recent leaders of the church have neglected. So I think, yes, our prophets make mistakes. that does not prevent them from being prophets and giving us added insight into the Spirit of God. And our job is to support them to the best that we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Blair. David Job, go ahead, and then Brent.
Kind of trying to follow up on what Val asked. I put a link in the chat to Community of Christ webpage, and it is talking about our priesthood, and it says priesthood is a sacred covenant with God and the church. Priesthood members are ministers dedicated to creating sacred communities that prepare, equip, and send disciples in Christ's mission. They are called by God for specific ministries and servant leadership roles. Each role or office represents a different part of Jesus' ministry. And then for all of the priesthood offices, it has a statement about their responsibilities. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Brent, go ahead. Merle, do you have your hand up?
Yes.
Okay, I'll get to you after Brent, okay?
Okay.
Go ahead, Brent. Thank you.
So I have a couple of thoughts on this, actually. So if I heard Bill's thoughts correctly, he pointed out in 3rd Nephi where it says that at some point the Gentiles turn their backs on the gospel. And then that in the Doctrine and Covenants, it also says that if we don't complete the temple, he's going to take away the fullness of the gospel. And my thought is that if you look at history, that's kind of what happened. When we didn't finish the temple and the prophet and his brother were martyred, the church got together and they were a united church and they splintered. And there was great pride in all of the groups. They're all sure that they are the one with the football, right? That's what it means to be Mormon, is to believe that your branch has the football. And I think that the Lord rightly prophesied that we would lose the fullness of the gospel, because the fullness of the gospel is unity among the children of Christ, right? And we are not united. And this group is a group who wants to be united. And I think that that's great. But when the entire church wants to be united, and I think I also mean with the rest of Christianity, like when the entire church of Christ wants to be one, we'll have the fullness of the gospel. And until then, it doesn't matter who has the football. That's my thoughts on that.
Thank you, Brent. So Bill Sheperd, do you want to type in the chat if you think we are on track with your question? Are we getting to your point?
When I was,
Can you type it in the chat, Bill? Because we're not getting 90% of what you're saying. Thank you. And while he's doing that, Phil, you want to go ahead with your question or comment?
You talking to me?
Can you hear
No,
me?
I'm talking. Oh,
You
sorry.
talking to me?
Sorry, Phil. Hang on. Yeah, Merle, go ahead.
Yes, the only thing I wanted to say was that when I first heard that Stacy Cram was going to be our next prophet president, I just felt so good about that. It just seemed so right. And when I went to church the following Sunday, I was talking to one of our ladies there, and she said exactly the same thing. So I certainly haven't been on a call committee or, any direct responsibility for his or for her being called to that office, but it just seemed like the correct thing to have happen. And I'm just very pleased that she's been called. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Merle. I appreciate that. So Bill, were you able to type anything in the chat, or do you know how to type in the chat?
No, I really don't, to be honest.
Okay. Are we close to answering your question?
No, I was curious, does anybody feel the church is kind of being rejected, or do we feel that things are on schedule?
That was very clear. Thank you, Lord, for helping us with that. Okay, Phil, let's go ahead and try you, and then we'll go with Val.
Yeah, what is coming to me, I've been listening to everybody talking about the prophet, but we can't rule out the gifts of the prophecy. And all nine gifts are available, working in people throughout. But the prophet for the church is for the church, for the body. But to prophesy has been a gift that's been given way back, and my goodness, Paul even talks about prophesying. He said, "Are you all prophets? No, not really. Are you all teachers? No. That's why he made elders and all those different things, and teachers and evangelists, all those different things. But many people carry a gift amongst them, and that is not necessarily singular out just for the church. It's singled out for as the Lord would prophesy through to the body and whatever it's needed, but not so much the total headquarters or church of Christ, of the reorganized church of Jesus Christ, but it's for all in the body to be a body, all to be one body. But yet, many people have gifts. My mother had prophecy that, man, she could sit there and tell you, all of a sudden the Lord speak through her and tell you all about yourself through the Lord. And the Lord would convict people in their spirits, and they would come to the Lord. And so I just don't want to be one-sided. I hear what everybody's talking about for Joseph Smith, Brigham Young, and different ones on down. But those are for the whole entire body in one lump. But don't forget, the gifts are for you. And he calls us to ask for the gifts.
Thank you, Phil. Val, go ahead, please, and then Paul.
So I think within the LDS tradition, I don't think there among the leadership and the vast majority of the members, there's much doubt about the sort of the chosenness and special role that the church has. Terry was really on point with it when he talked about the temple. So things like baptism for the dead for us is fundamental. The redemption of, or at least making possible for all humanity to fulfill ordinances that are required. Like the New Testament says, except a man be born of the water and the Spirit, he cannot enter in the kingdom of heaven. And so for us, baptism for the dead is critical. I'm building on what both Brent and Phil said. We certainly have the idea that the LDS temples and priesthood are essential for the salvation of humanity, but for sure, there's a much more charitable and appreciative attitude towards all the other LDS traditions or Mormon traditions, and also all the other Christian traditions, and not just Christian, even other religions. So I think one response to this might be that, like in Paul's talking about all these parts of the body, but that doesn't mean everybody has to be the hand. You actually have to have differences in order for it to be function as a body. And if everything was one thing, then you don't actually accomplish the purpose. So, and Christopher Stendahl, who's he actually came to BYU when I was there years ago. He was the Bishop of Stockholm, I thought, as a respected theologian. Is the guy that came up with the concept of holy envy, where he was, and one of the things he had holy envy for in the LDS tradition was the baptism for the dead. But there could be all the different types of branches have points of emphasis that might be manifesting something that the Savior wants to accomplish in the world, and we probably all should be open to appreciating whatever gifts and grace that's coming and revelations are coming to our various traditions. And for sure, I mean, I know for sure, having been on this in this meeting long enough, I haven't the slightest doubt that the Lord is manifesting his power within the community of Christ, the Restoration branches, the Monongahela group, Bill's group. So it's evident the Lord is doing that, but it's possible that we still have our distinct missions and are making the parts add up to a whole that's greater than the sum of the parts.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Val. Very well put. Paul, go ahead, and then Wednesday.
I'm in a curious position here because as host, it is my responsibility to help to moderate and make sure that we provide plenty of amicable space for people to disagree. I find myself in the peculiar position because I think that priesthood tends to be hierarchical, overrated, claim keys that they can't use, and in conflict oftentimes with professionality. And because we find those conflicts between the priestly authority and professional authority, we're having some difficulty across the whole spectrum, I believe, of Christianity, of reconciling our faith with the best of our scientific beliefs. I appreciate that for some of us, that's not as difficult as for others. But for me, the baptism for the dead is one of those for which I'm not able to gain reconciliation, because the 10th chapter of Moroni makes it very clear that the saving power of the Christ is sufficient for all the children and those that die without the law. And therefore, baptism availeth nothing for them, and is something that does not need to be performed. So for me, that's one of those areas that's reasonably clear. And so I'm glad the reorganized church chose to move that back into the appendix. And then we had an appendicitis and the appendix got removed. And so now I have put forward a resolution that passed in the Midlands yesterday to have the First Presidency put some explanation there so that people don't just see an empty hole where section 107 was, but that it will actually have an explanation about the nature of our belief in Scripture that is an ongoing concern in which the people ultimately have the decision about what it is they're going to adopt and embody. Again, I'm afraid I may be just a bit at odds again, because when it came to the discernment process, I discerned, I prayed, and I wrote my letter to the First Presidency to tell them whom I thought it should be. And yes, it was a woman. But I also made very clear that Stacey Cram would not be that woman, should not be that woman. I had 3 good reasons that she should not be. And so I made very clear advocacy that yes, I thought a woman that was of multilingual talent and would be able to provide more of a world church type of leadership would be appropriate. And now then I've had to reconsider. And I have to look back and recognize that as a teacher, I have frequently tried to put students in positions where they would have to rise to the occasion. And I believe that that's what's happening with Stacey Cram, and I am hoping and praying that she'll be able to rise to the occasion. By the same token, it is my hope that we all can rise to the occasion of being able to tell the true story of the Christ. For I believe that message is pivotal, central, and when we get distracted by all of our lyings, deceivings, pride, whoredoms, murders, and so forth, clearly we do not. We have left the line of the call to the cause of Zion, and until we embrace that call, until we learn the language of Zion, until we learn to love one another and seek our commonalities and build from them, I don't believe that we qualify to live in Zion. Joseph III, and I'm very proud to have, pride. I'm very proud to be representing Joseph III in his home in Lamoni now. For I found the beautiful statement from Callie Stebbins, whom I actually knew before she died in 1958 at 100 years old. Callie had known, her husband, Henry Stebbins, had been the secretary to Joseph III and secretary to the church. And the two had been acquainted not only in Lamoni, but also in Plano and in Nauvoo. Callie Stebbins spoke of a time when young Joseph, before he was leader of the church, was living in Nauvoo, and he started to go to town. And he heard a voice that told him, put the log chain in the wagon. He had no need for the log chain in the wagon, and so he disregarded it and started to take off. And then he heard that voice again that said, put the log chain in. And apparently it was there not too far from him, so he hopped off, grabbed the log chain, tossed it in the wagon, and headed off to Nauvoo to do his business. And I think it was on his return home that he encountered a couple of young men with a loaded wagon stuck in the mud. He had the log chain and he pulled them out, even though they were two of the sons of one of the men who had assassinated his father. And Callie Stebbins noted that young Joseph was saying with that, we have to learn to do good for those who would harm us. We have to learn to forgive if we're going to live together in the peaceable kingdom of Zion. I'm finished.
I was just going to say that I really agreed with what Val was saying earlier, that different parts of the movement keep important things alive. And what we're going to have to need to learn is unity. And that doesn't mean that we change our individual distinctiveness, but there's definitely things that we can learn and value in each other. And in better way, and be in better shape to be in the form to be accepted. I remember I was talking about things that I had learned from different parts of the movement, and like from my Brighamite saints, I learned a lot about the divine feminine that I found that was important, and then also different ways of looking at the Godhead, different ways of perceiving God. And then I learned from the Bickertonites and the Strungites about, what it was like to have a woman in priesthood from the beginning, and maybe how that impacted the history of their churches, it just so many different things happen in the different churches, and it's just kind of like, and there are divinely inspired things happening throughout them all. And at least all the ones that I've seen, I can see divinely inspired things in the ones that are in my vicinity. I will say that. And I think that there's value to that. And it would do us well to collectively have a better understanding of that.
Thank you, Wednesday. Don't see anybody waving their hands around that I'm missing.
I would try to.
Go ahead, Bill.
if this works. I was just struck by 3rd Nephi, and I wondered if anyone feels the gospel has been rejected, and what I'm hearing is probably no. So that was my reason for going that way, and I hope I didn't offend the LDS. I've been to Salt Lake many times researching and had wonderful experiences in Provo and Salt Lake and Ogden and so forth. So there is a fine spirit there. And I remember one Sunday morning, the streets were empty because they were going to church. So don't misrepresent what I tempted to say. So again, my question was, does anybody feel the gospel has been rejected?
Well, Bill, what gospel would it be that's rejected? Because we're all believers in Christ. We're all, I think most of us are believers in the Book of Mormon. So that's supposed to be the keystone of the religion. So, I mean, people could be rejected. If you say the gospel's been rejected, that would mean all of us have somehow rejected the gospel Christ was trying to restore through Joseph. But what is that gospel that got rejected? Do you have some views on that?
I really don't. I think I was just wanting to look at 3rd Nephi 16 and 10, and what do we as Mormons believe about that?
Val, did you want to respond to that or no?
No, I'm
You're mulling it over?
Well, he clarified. I just wanted to be clear about what the question was that Bill was posing.
Okay, thank you. Blair and then Terry. Go ahead, Blair.
Got to unmute.
There you go.
No, I don't think that we have, as a church or any group of restorationists, have rejected the gospel. I think we misunderstand different areas of the gospel in different ways, but I don't think any of us are dead on. I think that we all need to listen to each other. In 2007, I was walking down the street. It's River Street in Independence, which was my home, during a conference. And I was walking past the stone church, headed south across the street toward the auditorium. And I suddenly was aware of the temple at church just to my right. The temple, their LDS temple on the left, the auditorium, and behind the auditorium, or behind the temple, was the LDS Visitor Center. And I was struck by something, a concept, not any words, but a concept. It's time to come together. And I forgot about that. Most recently, I had a similar experience telling me it's time to come together. Our differences separate us, and that is not God's will. Our similarities so far are not sticking us together to be effective in building Zion. It's time to work together. No, I don't think the gospel has been rejected. I think we have, in different ways, lost sight of important things. In section 42 of both the LDS and our LDS Doctrine and Covenant, we find the statement that the gospel, the fullness of the gospel, is found in the Bible and the Book of Mormon. And that's what we should work together on. We will work together and meet God's purposes. Thank you.
Thank you, Blair. Terry and then Cheryl. Go ahead, please, Terry.
I just want to say amen to what was just said, that I was going to say some of those same things, but no, I just lost my train of thought. Oh, I know what it was. But to me, what was read in that section of 3rd Nephi was that it was the Gentiles that went goofy, and the restoration was to right that ship. And so I think most of us probably would agree with that, even though we're fractured. I think Blair had a good comment on that, and that was basically what I was going to say.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you. Cheryl, go ahead, please.
Sorry, I had to unmute. Okay,
Yep.
so yeah, that was a good, that very last comment was sort of answered my question, because I was wondering what everybody thinks then, because I know there is a group of people who believe that because the temple was never finished, that, you know, the Gentiles did. And so I wondered what you guys all thought. What does that mean? And what does that mean for us? Because there's, you know, especially LDS, there's millions of us and thousands of others who still are quite dedicated to the gospel. So if you know, the Gentiles have been rejected, is that us? And then where does that put us? And what are we supposed to be doing? So, but that was a really good point, though, that that maybe looking at the Gentiles as being kind of what, the world, and then the LDS or the Mormon group of people are supposed to right that ship that's been, you know, tousled about. Is that what you're saying?
Me.
And another thing before I go too is just I would want to hear Bill's, if we can get his internet going well enough to hear. I would love to hear about the Strangites too, because I believe the Strangites think that that the gospel, that the time the Gentiles has closed now, right? And so I'd like to hear a little bit about how the Strangites are handling that.
The Stringites believe that the gospel was rejected, that the prophets, meaning Joseph Smith, James A. Strang, were murdered and the people driven and so forth. So that would be correct, that the Stringites, all 45 of us, believe that the gospel would have been rejected.
Well, Bill, when you say the gospel's rejected, I mean the gospel. I can you clarify that a little bit, because are you saying that the prophets that God sent were rejected, and in that sense the gospel was rejected, or that?
No, that certainly we believe that Joseph Smith was a prophet and died a full prophet, for instance. That the message, the gospel message to the people was not accepted, in that there was so much hostility, and again the sackings and the burnings and the murders and the driving. That is kind of the question. Did those hostile reactions meant the gospel was rejected, or that was to be part of? Does that make sense?
Well, so that would be saying that the gospel was sort of the institutional embodiments of it in those prophet figures. In other words, it's not a set of doctrines, because just because Joseph was killed and James Strang was killed doesn't mean that their teachings disappeared. They're still available.
Thank you.
If
Thank
the
you.
gospel is teachings and beliefs, those are still with us. But if it's institutional figures that somehow embody God's attempt to establish an authoritative institutional body, then if you could, I can see why in the Strang tradition that you might think that's been rejected. We don't obviously in the Brighamite tradition, because we think the priesthood lines continued. I gather that's true in the community of Christ too, because you have prophets. But
Okay. Phil, and then Brent. Go ahead, please, Phil.
Well, what was coming to me is what was really said was, first we were talking about it's time to everybody get together and make it all work. Okay. And then we come to the point where the Osage Nation saw Jesus by the temple lot there. And he spoke to them and told them in that very spot would be a great lodge built now. I know you guys don't, you think of buildings as temples, and we Indians think that their church is the sky, the out in the world, out in the open. And but then the thoughts went back to me. He said, Jesus said, "Know ye not that ye are the temple?" Think of that. That you are the temple. So all the things that we build, Jesus even stood in there, and the disciples said, "Oh, see these great stones that are standing here," said to Jesus. They said to him and to the disciples, and Jesus said, "Not a stone you see here that's standing shall be thrown down." Now, the thing is that was a very David's the great temple built there in Israel, and the Medes come in and tore everything to pieces. But the one thing that it will not fall, is the salvation that's in us working together. That's why we survive, because the temple of God is in you. It's in you.
Thank you, Phil. Brent, go ahead, please.
So I just wanted to reread the end of that verse in 3rd Nephi, because we talk about the rejecting of the gospel, which it doesn't really say that. It says, "If they shall do these things," all those terrible things, "and shall reject the fullness of my gospel," which I think is synonymous with doing all those terrible things. That's rejecting the fullness. "Saith the Father, I will bring the fullness of my gospel from among them." And it doesn't say that we won't still have the gospel. It says that he'll bring the fullness of the gospel from among them. And I think that this is something that we should all ask ourselves. Do we have the fullness of the gospel? What's the difference between the gospel and the fullness of the gospel, and do we have it? And my thought is that, I mean, you watch, how many times have the Community of Christ and or RLDS group gone to the temple lot group and said, let's build a temple on the temple lot. And then for whatever reason, one of the groups backs out because we don't know how to be united as a people. Brigham Young went one way and Sidney Rigdon went another way and James Strang went another way because we don't know how to be one. I mean, it's interesting that the concept of Zion is to be one, and we tend to splinter so that we can go try to be Zion. Every new splinter wants to be Zion. And it's like that you don't reach Zion by splintering, you reach Zion by uniting. And all those keys were in Nauvoo, and they went in every direction. They're still here, and they're all over the place, and they're not united because we choose not to be united. And I think that the Lord wants us to build a temple on the temple lot, and he wants us to do it united. That's my personal belief in the whole thing.
Thank you, Brent. Paul, go ahead, please.
Fascinating discussion. I wanted to join with Brother Harper in calling what I think is a clear challenge, especially to the LDS movement, having purchased the Kirtland Temple, to very carefully evaluate the stewardship of temples. For as Brother Harper points out, and he takes what I think my wife's family would highlight as being part of the Polynesian tradition, that everything has its shell. Interesting that when we were asked to design the temple in Independence, she was in that committee that designed, and she laid down a seashell as the design of the temple. And it got stood up on its head to actually be constructed. But I think nonetheless she had a role in it. The idea, though, of the Polynesians is that everything has its shell. Man's shell is his woman, woman's shell is her home, her house's shell is the palm trees. Palm trees have the shell of the clouds have the shell of the stars, the moon, the sky, and the sun, and they sprinkle down the light to illuminate everyone within their shell. When we look at the nature of the temple and see the sky as the shell, or as Brother Harper indicates, that you are the temple. For us to be good stewards of our temples, I think, is an ultimate call. And so I think there's a profound challenge for the LDS to reconsider the nature of the temple as they're using it, because the Kirtland Temple clearly was open. And I think that we need to be open temples to receive the Holy Spirit. I think that brings us then back to what Brother Bryant and Brother Larson have said, that yes, we need to seek unification, seek to be united, seek to love each other such that we can reach beyond our chasms and build bridges. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Val, go ahead, please.
So, I think the critical question with the unity is, what is the principle that brings about that unity? So in the early history of the church, when Hiram Page was receiving revelations, that had the potential to fracture the community, because if revelations are coming from, if anyone can receive a revelation for the church as a whole, then you're going to have revelations that are not consistent with each other. So you have to have some process for harmonizing what is the voice of heaven that's operating in the community. And in our tradition, of course, the unity is the principle of unity is in the First Presidency and the Quorum of the 12 having exclusive right to declare doctrine, and also exclusive ultimate holding of the keys. but there's there's a sense in which, at least as we meet together here, I would say we're already unified. This meeting is unified. I don't ever experience any great rancor as the different traditions comment here. I think we're all. It's just when we come together where we're feeling connected. We're recognizing God working in each other's lives, and in the sense of we're all unified in Christ because we're all devoted followers of the Savior and know we need His grace and so forth. And I don't think anyone's harshly judging anyone else because they're in the wrong tradition. I haven't seen that in any of the comments that have ever come through here. So I'm not sure that we aren't unified in the sense of respecting each other, loving each other, recognizing God's hand in each other's lives. But on issues of doctrine and practice, I think each of our institutions have their own mechanisms. You folks were talking about the discernment process through which your new prophet was selected, and you all have when you have your meetings at your temples, it's a much more consultative process, and you achieve unity through, in kind of a Japanese way, more than than say the LDS, which is very hierarchical, but that's a principle of unity for us. We definitely would fly to pieces in a lot of ways if we didn't have that kind of centralized declaration of doctrine. So unity could be if we want to be together, we have to define the sort of level of aggregation or the principle of aggregation we want to have. If that principle is respect and love for each other and recognition of God's hand in all of our lives, I think that already exists. That certainly, President Nelson yesterday, when he was giving his talk at the end of conference, spoke affectionately and respectfully of the community of Christ when he was talking about the transaction of the temple coming into the LDS possession. So, and we haven't always had that spirit of respect and affection, but he said we worked together for years and respectfully and so forth. I think there's a sense in which we're way more unified than we've ever been before in the levels of respect and love we have for each other. But when you all are calling for more unity, I mean, maybe you're saying that we need to come under a single ecclesiastical organization. I don't think there's much prospect of that, but there is we can, as this meeting demonstrates, love and respect each other.
Thank you, Val. David, go ahead, and then Blair.
So I just had one question for Val. His comment that you made just now, you referred to the keys. Can you go a little deeper into what you're referring to as far as the keys?
Yes, President Nelson was really specific on that yesterday. He's talking about the keys of the sealing power, and it's the keys restored to Oliver and Joseph in the Melchizedek and Aaronic priesthood, and then it's the visits that happened there in the Kirtland Temple to Joseph and Oliver, Elijah with the sealing power. And that's why Terry was talking about the temple is at the heart of the LDS sense of mission. So our belief is that those keys are held exclusively by one person on earth at any given time, and that's the president of the church, which was Joseph Smith, and then was passed on ultimately through Brigham down through the succession of prophets. So yeah, that priesthood authority and sort of the one person holding those keys is the uniting principle within the LDS tradition, and that's what holds us together. Those keys are held first by the president of the church, then by the first presidency, and then collectively by the quorum of the 12. And anything that we do, any authority claims we make, all ultimately trace back to that one person. That's our principle of unity.
Do those keys have names?
Well, the sealing power. I mean, it'd be the headship of the Melchizedek priesthood, the headship of the Aaronic priesthood, the sealing power. So in the temple, when people are married for time and eternity, that is all done derivatively through the power and the keys held by the president of the church. Is the way we view it.
You have an understanding of the keys of keys of the kingdom and the keys to the mysteries and revelations?
I want to invite James Lucas and others in the LDS tradition to jump in. I've sort of tapped out my sense of it. It's mostly in Terry if he wants to. For me, it's the sealing power is the most important thing, and everything that happens in the temple is at the heart of it, and all of that is through the authorization of the person who holds all keys, which is the president of the church at any given time. But others might have a broader and richer view of the matter than what I've articulated. Terry, you have different views on that, or?
Well, that authority is passed down through various people. It goes from the apostles to stake presidents, and from stake presidents it goes to bishops, and from bishops it goes to other people. So everything isn't done with the immediate approval of the church president, but that authority is what's the word I want? Anyway, it's given to other people to carry out those things. So the temple, the head of the church doesn't do everything. It's the authority is given to other officers in the church.
But do you differentiate between the keys of the kingdom and the keys of mysteries and revelations?
Well, for example, Phil was talking about, and I think several other people talk about that I think it's Moroni talks about the various gifts that people have, and that all of us will concur that they've received one or more of those at any one different time in their lives, but those aren't the keys to guide the church. And so keys are specific authority to do certain things. Like I'm what's called an ordinance worker in the temple, and we have certain authority to do certain things in the temple that are given to us by the leaders of the temple. We don't go to Salt Lake to get that, it comes down from the top. And so that authority is distributed from the top down, depending on what is needed. And it doesn't have any specific name for that authority. The positions do, yes. Like I said, I'm an ordinance worker, but that doesn't mean I can't do a lot of other things. But that's for just work in the temple alone.
But your authority as a sealer is directly traceable back to one of the prophets. The prophets laid his hand on somebody, conferred on them an authority, and that authority in turn was passed on to you. So we have one thing that we do is people trace their line of authority back basically to Peter, James, and John, and that's all tied up with this idea of keys, that you actually can trace back so and so received the authority from this person, that person, that person. It ultimately comes back to Joseph, Oliver, and Peter, James, and John, and John the Baptist. And the keys are, for us within our tradition, it almost always has a kind of authority idea that you have the right to do certain things, but it's all ultimately derivative from the authorities that came to Joseph and Oliver, and through direct transmission down through time. But James might have other ideas about it.
It was my understanding that when the 12 apostles were sent out the first time on their missions to go to England, so to speak, that's what they were given. They were given the keys to the kingdom in order to go out and proclaim the gospel throughout all the world. But then there was also the keys of mysteries and revelations. I'm just curious, does anybody have an understanding of what those keys are and the difference of those keys?
Well, those keys were number one, to preach the gospel, to baptize people, to ordain people to priesthood offices. Those are the keys that those apostles had that they gave to other people after they were baptized and joined the church and were baptized. That's what those keys were.
Yeah, and are you saying those the keys of the kingdom and keys of mysteries and revelations are one and the same?
I don't know what you mean by the keys of the revelation.
Well, the ordinations, my understanding, that's what the keys that the prophet holds when
Yes.
when he's administering as a prophet. But I'm just curious, is the keys of the kingdom and the key, and because they were specifically given to the 12 when they went on their missions, and then as far as opening the gospel up, but the keys of mysteries and revelations were for the administration of the prophet. And I'm just wondering, are they one? Are you saying they're one and the same?
I say not directly. I don't know what Val says, but I think it's a matter of semantics here, but I may be misunderstanding.
Well,
Okay.
we would say that the only person authorized to receive revelation for the church as a whole is the prophet. People can't contradict him, and if you're contradicting him, then you can have your own opinions, but only he can speak for the church as a whole. And we trace that back basically to what Joseph was saying in response to Hiram Page's revelations. So the keys to revelation for the church, for sure, reside in the president of the church at any given time.
Okay, thank you.
Bill, it's been your session. Please go ahead and jump in.
Yeah.
Well, I just think I'm unmuted. I think this is rather remarkable. To think Brighamites and Strangites and Josephites meeting together and discussion rationally. I think this is really great. And I guess when I asked if we could look at this, I think this is what I had in mind, that if we could look at what does rejection mean, does that come down to us and so forth. So I thank all of you, and I'm so sorry I had problems with my computer.
Well, we thank you for a wonderful presentation, Bill, and a lot of great dialogue for sure, discussion. Where did he go? Did we lose him? Oh, there he is.
I would like to, in the sense of camaraderie and joint understanding that we are exhibiting as a group here, I would like to build on that. Most of you probably remember that I made presentations on the characters transcript and the translation of it. I am getting to the point that I'm about the only one that knows how to read that and realize that at 92, I haven't got too many years left. And it's not going to do anybody any good for me to know about it and die. I want to tell people how to read those Reformed Egyptian characters. I would like to suggest that a group of people like this meet once a week, and I would, within about an hour, I would present certain sections of how to read the characters, and I think this would give our missionaries a wonderful testimony to be able to pull that Kenton transcript out and show how it is a testimony of Christ. Therefore, I am proposing that we set up a system parallel to what we got here. And once a week, I make this presentation. I want to know if there are people here that would like to be able to read those characters and testify of Christ from them.
All right. I see 3 hands, Blair. And I think
Sure, that would be fun.
4.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting.
Record it and write it down, or at least record it so that it's preserved.
I
I
would
think
want to
we're
do
still
that.
recording.
I would want to do the recording of the presentations so that they are available for other people to look at later.
I have Tuesday nights at 8 o'clock available if that would work, if we could work out a time like that.
Okay, would Tuesday night would be a good night for those of you that are interested?
Would we just use the same channel?
No,
Robert?
it would be the same. And
Yes, but I was going, my thought was having it before this session, perhaps even, you know, an hour and a half before this or something like that.
You're thinking 6:30 on Monday?
Yeah.
I have a 6:45 in conflict twice a month.
But they would be recorded, right?
I would like somebody to volunteer to do what Bob's doing. Manage the program, record it, because it's something that requires multitasking, and I'm getting to the point that I'm got to put my mind to just one thing at a time.
Well, I can record it, if that's what you're asking. I can be a part of it and record it.
Would you play Deb's part too?
Oh, I'm not sure I'm that good.
No, we need somebody to run the thing other than teaching.
I can assist, but whether I'd be here every Monday at that time, sometimes I work till almost 6 o'clock. So I would do my best, Blair.
All right. I don't want to commit to a start time, but let's think about this at what is 6:30? Is that the word?
I'm usually busy till about 6.
Or possibly
Sorry, 7.
8 o'clock on Tuesday is also an option as far as I'm concerned.
These are all Missouri Standard.
Well, we don't want to interrupt. We don't want to interfere with your program here.
What were you saying, Brent?
We're talking in Missouri time, right?
Central time.
Just so we're all on the same page.
Brian says he'd like 1 hour before the regular time.
1 hour before the regular time. And I'll try and make it a 45-minute lesson.
We talk about
so you've got time
Monday night at
7.
Monday night at 7.
Oh, so sorry. I'm on a different time zone than y'all. Yeah, cool.
Does that or does that not work for you Wednesday?
It works.
Okay. A Wednesday or Central time, Monday.
Okay. It's going to take me a little while to do some preparation work before I can commit to start teaching. So let's please announce this each week, and we will try to start maybe sometime in June.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, looks like we got some more questions or hands raised. James
We
Lucas,
are talking in terms of Monday, right?
that's correct. Monday
Monday
night at 7.
at 7. Okay.
Okay, all right. James, go ahead, please.
Yeah,
Thank you.
y'all rushed ahead with very constructive and useful discussions on other subjects. I'm going back to this keys question. This is one where it'd be interesting to check our sources. So, and I'm sorry, I know that there is available online a directory that compares the Community of Christ Doctrine and Covenants with the LDS Doctrine and Covenants, but I wasn't able to like get there real quick to find that. But a question would be, in the LDS Doctrine and Covenants, there's a section 110, which is an account of the dedication of the Kirtland Temple on April 30th, 1836. And it recounts the appearance of Christ and of Moses, Elias, and Elijah to Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery. And it's at that time, in at least LDS belief, that these keys were conferred to Joseph and Oliver, who were then the president and assistant president of the church.
That's not in our LDS Church of Doctrine and Covenants.
That's not in the Community of Christ Doctrine and Covenants?
That's right.
Okay, so
it was one of those documents that was not selected to go into the Book of Commandments by Joseph Smith. When the Doctrine and Covenants was produced, they started with the Book of Commandments.
Right. Let me see. Okay, so it doesn't give us a documentary history of the thing when it was included in the LDS Doctrine and Covenants. It would not have been in the Book of Commandments because the Book of Commandments was 1835, and this was not recorded till 1836 at the time of the dedication of Kirtland Temple.
Yeah, okay.
So in any event, just as a factual historical question,
you're correct. Yeah.
Yeah, this is the source of the LDS belief in that there were particular authoritative, hierarchical, administrative, sacerdotal, to use the fancy word for priesthood, keys that were conferred by these ancient prophets to Joseph and Oliver as the leadership of the church. And this is, was believed was passed to the Quorum of the 12. And they, are in our view, the current Quorum of the 12 and leadership of the LDS Church are direct institutional heirs of this authority that was given to Joseph and Oliver at this time. So that's the source of this belief in keys that we've been discussing here. But if that event in April, on April 3rd of 1836, is not recognized as a, either, well, I guess I'd be curious to know, and of course, as we all have learned here, folks in the Community of Christ, especially if we include folks in the restoration branches and so forth, can have a variety of views on these questions. But I guess the question that would be enlightening would be, is the belief that this event never happened, that there were not these appearances to Joseph and Oliver in 1836? Or is the belief that they did occur, but what happened, to Joseph and Oliver was not the transfer of some kind of institutionally based sacerdotal, to use a fancy word for priesthood, authority that became embodied in the institution of the church and the presiding quorums of the church? So you could have, I could see two views: one, that these events never even happened, or two, that they did happen, but what happened wasn't how LDS people interpret it. But that's the source of this concept of priesthood keys that Val and Terry have been talking about. Is this thing that this section account of these visitations in Kirtland?
May I address that?
Sure.
The Doctrine and Covenants was first printed in 1835. It would not have had this in it.
Right.
The Doctrine and Covenants was published again in 1840 and did not have this in it. The Doctrine and Covenants was published by the Mormon Church with this in it by Orson Pratt. I think it's 1876, maybe 78, when the Book of Mormon was renumbered by Orson Pratt.
Yeah, that was 1879, I think.
That was when this number, this item went in the LDS Doctrine and Covenants the first time.
Okay, I'm not familiar with the documentary history, so I've got no reason to dispute you. Okay.
I would not deny it as having taken place. I would say that it was not perceived by Joseph Smith as being a prophecy for the church, or he would have put it in the 1840 edition. My position.
Okay, thank you. I mean, that's a perfectly reasonable position, and I think it helps clarify our discussion that we've been having, to know that we're actually kind of going by different sources, or we have different views of sort of the original sources. Right. So anyway, I think that's clarifying, and I thank you for sharing that documentary history, because that would explain why the two traditions have different views.
Clarified something for me too. Why was that? Why do you have those viewpoints? Now I see.
Yeah, that
we need to keep together and talk together.
Right. And we both learned something very interesting, very useful. That's right. Okay, I just wanted to raise that issue kind of to clarify the documentary history, and this has been very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul, go ahead, please.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, Blair. I had my hand up to reiterate basically the same history that you did, of the significant 1840 edition not having that document. But I also wanted to highlight that it's been my joy to try to represent Joseph III, and I noticed that the LDS Church bypasses his authority, which came from his father, was passed to his son, to his other son, to his other son. So we had 4 prophets that lived in the house that I am now the steward over. And to appreciate that those men presumably were passing the keys on to the people that they ordained, which directly passes to my father and to me. Therefore, if I want to pursue keys along that key chain, then yes, I can. However, I think that's somewhat of an arrogant thing to do. And I have come to believe that the call to be member is perhaps the most important, and that we err when we elevate priesthood or elevate people into priesthood offices that are too sanctimonious. We err when we presume our priestly authority and abuse it. And sometimes that does happen. And for us to be honest with ourselves and recognize that the power of the member, the power of the person, that all are called, that all have divine gifts. These are fundamental commonalities that I think need to be appreciated more. And our claims for priestly authority, our claims for some kind of magical power. And I hesitate to say that because I just prayed for a special blessing for a lady on Friday who's having surgery today. And yes, I pray with faith to ask for a special blessing for her. I believe that I'm authorized to do that. However, the other people who are authorized to, well, her daughter is Abby that I had you pray for earlier, who was in that tragic accident in Iowa in July of last year. Abigail is now preparing to graduate this month from college after having been in a coma for a month. And her mother now is in the hospital for surgery today and asked for prayers because, in part, because she's seen the remarkable power of faith and prayer united across the spectrum of the globe in behalf of her daughter and her family. Let us recognize that we are basic, simple human beings, and when we claim priestly authority, we are claiming to be servants. I yield.
Thank you, Paul. David, go ahead, please.
Totally different direction, just for fun here. We've often in this group mentioned the Gentiles. I wonder how our thinking would change if we would recognize that the people of Asia, think Japan, China, India, they're Gentiles. Another totally different thought. In biology, if a species has very limited, very small genetic diversity, that species is at risk for extinction. If the species has great genetic diversity, it can survive all kinds of things. Even though if they get that great diversity, it's still the same species. I think maybe our call as Christians is to accept our diversity and recognize we are one species, because our diversity may be our greatest strength. Leave it at that.
I love it.
Thank you, David.
Yep, thank you, David.
Okay, Terry, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to follow up with James's question. I don't know why Joseph didn't include section 110 and the other editions of the Doctrine and Covenants. I have no idea. But anyway, the authority that was given in that Kirtland temple by those prophets was acted upon in the Nauvoo temple. And so he thought it was that important, but I don't know. I can't explain the other one anyway. So, amen.
Well, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, it's after 10 o'clock, and I have to get up and make my way to Iowa tomorrow. And so, good night. The Lord is watching o'er you. Good night. His blessings go before you. Good night. And we'll be praying for you. So good night. May God bless you. And thank you all for your participation. Amicable, even though we disagree.
Good night, everybody. See you next week.